Welcome to the NBA Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden. An absolute massive NBA slate on board for tonight. And it's kind of one that I was dreading a little bit last night, and here we are. I'm here.
Yeah, it's we have 14 games on the slate. I was telling you before we started, I spent like 5 or 6 hours writing, researching, doing my podcast notes, and I'm still like, there's like one or two players that I've narrowed down on for to start my lineups, and there's all the stars are in great spots, all the mid range guys are in great spots, all the value plays are in great spots. There's so much to talk about, so many great ways to go tonight. It's uh it's gonna be tough, but we'll power through it, and hopefully we won't be here for 3 hours.
Yeah. It's interesting because you mentioned all the guys that are in good spots tonight. We have a couple of revenge narratives. We have all that. Like this slate literally has everything, and on a 14 game slate, you expected to. What are your thoughts on like ownership in terms of the top guys? Like I kind of see things being fairly spread out of maybe one or two players that could become a little bit chalky.
I think the stars from the Golden State Oklahoma City game are going to draw a lot of ownership, which I mean, there's a lot of stars, and that's basically an all-star game going on there. But I think they're going to draw a little bit more ownership just because the narrative there, Westbrook and Durant. I think LeBron's going to be a little chalky. Um, I kind of feel like, and I alluded to it in my GPP article today. I think guys like Harden are going to go a little bit under owned because kind of ownership's going to gravitate in a couple other areas. But I think that's kind of how it's going to shake down. I think in cash, stars and scrubs is going to be a popular route. I think GPPs tonight. I think a balanced lineup without a bunch of these stars is going to be the way to go.
Yeah, no, definitely. Let's dive in here. Portland and Philly, 212 total. You weren't really on this game. I mean, obviously, two teams that have been pretty good defensively to start the year. Sorry, more so on Portland's side, obviously. Some of these guys kind of overpriced on this Philly side. I didn't have a ton of interest coming in. Like, it's a tough matchup for guys like Simmons, Embiid, Covington. I'm kind of off.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of interest in either side of this game. I mean, I will say I think Simmons is an excellent play as far as cash games go, just because I mean he's just such a safe floor option on tonight's slate. I was a little concerned that the line going into today hadn't come out yet. It came out about 30 minutes ago. Philly was favored by 4. So it is favored by 4. I was a little concerned maybe Embiid would sit or maybe Damian Lillard was more injured than he was alluding to, but apparently that's not the case. I think you can go this route in GPPs. You can look at like Covington, Embiid, guys like that. But Simmons is really the only guy that I'm really that interested in at all from this game.
Yeah. I mean, on the Portland side, like I have a little bit of interest in Lillard, just because he's going to be a lower ownership type of guy. 76 are still giving up a decent amount of fantasy points to point guards this year. Like Lillard's shot's been off. I mean, he's been shooting about 37% over the last 5 games. Not great from three. But I'm definitely on board on a team that's given up 109 points per game. So I think Lillard and McCollum, would be excellent GPP plays tonight just because I don't see their ownership getting over 10%.
Yeah, I don't mind the load. I think there's a couple other options you can go with, especially in GPPs. One guy that we're going to get to here shortly that's extremely underpriced for the upside he has. I think McCollum is probably the guy that I would lean towards here. He's kind of shouldered the offensive load for this team. He's been pretty darn consistent at 7,300 on DraftKings. I don't mind that route.
Yeah, it's been a rotating power forward kind of rotation for Portland. Like I don't feel like diving into that right now.
I'm not going near Harkless. I don't want to chase the Noah Vonleh 11 and 18 game. Ed Davis is a little interesting if you think Nurkic could get in foul trouble, but I don't want any part of the Nurkic, Davis, Vonleh, Harkless, Swanigan, any of these guys. There's no reason to go there on a 14 game slate.
Yeah. Brooklyn, Cleveland, this next one here, 228 total. Cleveland 10-point favorites. We'll start with the Nets side here first. And it was funny just looking through salaries last night, just kind of, browsing. And Spencer Dinwiddie popped up, and I was like, holy hell.
Yeah, I think FanDuel has overreacted to Spencer Dinwiddie just a little bit. That being said, even at that price on FanDuel and especially at his price on DraftKings, he's an excellent cash game play. We know Cleveland's defense is terrible this season. I will say that they have been better over the past like 5 games. But these guys are still really old and they don't play very good defense, and they're going to struggle in fast-paced matchups like this. So I think you can. I think you kind of have to play Dinwiddie in cash games, like because he's going to have a ton of ownership. The performances have been there for him. I mean, 35, 50, 39 over the last 3 games, 40 against Cleveland last time out. He's playing the minutes. His assist rate is one of the best in the NBA. Like, I don't really want to fade him in the spot.
No, I don't either. Like I'm fine with the prices. Like even on FanDuel, like I really am okay with 7,600 for what he's producing. I mean, solid matchup. Like you said, I mean, he's just been. I mean, he's kind of earned it, I guess, over his 3 games. If you took a 3 game sample size and go, what would I put his salary at? Like 7,600 seems fair.
Yeah, obviously in GPPs you can fade them. Like I would. There's cases to be made for fading someone like Dinwiddie in GPPs because, I mean, it is Spencer Dinwiddie. Like we don't really have a large sample of him being this good, so he could come out and flop. But in cash games at the ownership that he's going to have, like it's kind of tough to fade him.
Yeah. I know another guy that you were interested in, Alan Crabb, 4,600 on DK. Obviously a pretty good spot for a guy who's been shooting actually lights out the past couple of games.
Yeah, he really has, and the minutes have been there for him, which is the awesome part. I mean, if you just look, he's 30 minutes or more in the last 5 games. He's been shooting really, really well. Over the last 4, he's shooting 46% from the floor, 47% from three. Cavs allowing opponents to shoot a decent amount of 3 pointers. Are allowing 38% on opponent 3 pointers, and they're allowing a lot of them per game. I mean, they're allowing 7.1 corner threes per game. Crab's an excellent GPP play. Like it's Alan Crabb. He can come out and flop as well, but like he's in my GPP article for a reason. If you're gonna play those amount of minutes and play against a bad defense, like I really want to have some exposure here. And if Trevor Booker is out, Alan Crabb is seeing an increase of 5.6% in his usage rate without Trevor Booker on the floor this season.
Yeah, with Booker out, like it kind of brings us to the front court. Rondé Hollis Jefferson, been playing really well. He's another guy who I kind of find to be a little bit overpriced on FanDuel. DraftKings, I mean, he's 6,400, like that's reasonable. He's 72, like he's kind of right in that range of Aaron Gordon, Draymond Green. You got Carmelo Anthony Kuzma right there. Like he's a little bit kind of just mispriced, I guess, in that where I'm kind of going those other directions.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of interest in him on FanDuel. I do like him on DraftKings where he's 6,400. I think the guy that I'm more interested in just in general on both sides is DeMar Carroll. Again, another guy that's going to play a bunch of minutes. He's going to match up with LeBron, so you're going to have the opportunity for him to grab a couple extra steals. He's just been outstanding for the majority of the season. I know he had a couple bad games against Utah and Boston, Utah again, but those are terrible matchups. Cash games, GPPs, I think Damari Carroll is one of the best plays on the night. He's 5,300 on DraftKings. He's extremely cheap on FanDuel as well. He's one of the better plays on the slate.
Anyone else from that side? Any one of their 14 players?
The news on Booker is going to kind of have an impact on this game. We could see Tyler Zeller come in and play some extra minutes. There's probably some better cheap options tonight, but if you're going to get 20 plus minutes of Tyler Zeller against the Cavs, you could go there as a punt option.
Yep. And on the Cavs side, I mean, obviously LeBron is going to be a popular option, as you said. I mean, great spot for him. We saw it wasn't a flop last game, but we saw the blowout from the Cavs, and LeBron played 27 minutes, got some rest. Is there any possibility that happens tonight? Like, where we get kind of a timid LeBron because they're up 30.
I don't think so. Like I don't see this game blowing out. Like Brooklyn has been fairly competitive. I mean, we saw them getting blown out by the Warriors, and then they pulled that game a little bit closer and ended up they only lost by I don't have it in front of me, but I know the game ended up being fairly close for the Nets. It was 118-111. So I don't have a lot of concern with this game blowing out. LeBron is just an excellent cash game option, excellent GPP option. Like if you're looking to pay up for a stud, I think he's probably the safest one on the board.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in this matchup, hard to really not go with him. As far as the secondary options go, Kevin Love, I just have a hard time going to him on tonight's slate because Marcus Gasol is literally like right there. Like, and I just rather go Marcus Gasol.
If you're gonna fade LeBron, if you're gonna fade LeBron and get exposure to the Brooklyn side, you're gonna have to probably find someone from Cleveland that you like. Obviously, Love had a terrible game against Brooklyn last time out. Trevor Booker played in that game. That could have had something to do with it. I think if Booker sits, I think Kevin Love is probably one of the best GPP plays from the Cleveland side of this.
I don't mind J.R. Smith, still really cheap. You mentioned the stars and scrub approach. Like he could be part of that because he's really cheap on both sides at shooting guard. Probably more so of a play for me on FanDuel where you got a roster two. Like, obviously coming off 2 down games, but a guy that you can usually find between 20 and 25 fantasy points, especially in a matchup like this. So I kind of like Smith at his prices.
Yeah, he's fine. You could look at Dwayne Wade. Obviously, you're probably chasing points. He's got a couple big games in his last 4. You're probably chasing a little bit with him, but he's a fine option. And I think Jeff Green is. I mentioned it last night on Twitter. I think this is going to be a Jeff Green chalk game. He's 3,800 on DraftKings. If you expect that he's going to get like 20, 22 minutes against Brooklyn, that's probably enough for him to pay off salary.
Yeah. Washington, Charlotte, 209. Probably a game that's not going to jump out at people on this slate, but I think there's actually some valuable plays in this one, especially if you're going kind of the low ownership route.
There are a couple guys that I'm extremely interested in, and it starts with John Wall. I mean, John Wall is 8,700 on DraftKings. I don't really know. I don't really think you need to say much else. John Wall is 8,700 on DraftKings, and like we know, John Wall is one of those guys where when you see him under 10K anywhere, you're basically like, I gotta play him because he's just too cheap. He's now under 9K on DraftKings. Like Kemba Walker, not great on defense. Charlotte, they are a decent rim protection team, but some of that might be smoke and mirrors. Like this could be a spot where John Wall just goes absolutely off, and a lot of great options on the slate. He's probably not going to have a ton of ownership.
No, I don't think so. Like, I really think the top point guards, I mean, Westbrook, a lot of people gravitate towards him, and that kind of takes away from everyone else up there over, 8,500, 8K.
Yeah, it really does. And I don't know that you want to go there in cash just because it is John Wall. But like GPPs, he has a ton of upside, especially at that price.
Yeah. As far as other Wizards guys go, I don't have a ton of interest. Like Wall was the main guy that I was looking at. Front court guys, I'm in a little bit of a tougher spot. So I think Wall was kind of the one direction I had with the Washington side. But Charlotte, I have a little bit of interest in the front court.
Only guy that I really like from Washington that I might have a little bit of interest in is Markieff Morris. Like he's gonna go off one of these games. And it may be tonight, it may not be tonight, but like if you're building a bunch of lineups, I think you want to get some exposure to him because you want to be on him whenever he does go off. I know it's not the greatest analysis, but like I think this is a spot where he could. Otto Porter's a little interesting, but there's not a whole lot to really like about the spot.
Yeah. And on the other side, I mean, like I'm cool with Kemba here. Once again, like he kind of fits the mold of the rest of these guys where he's probably going to be overlooked and lower owned coming off of 2 kind of average games. But a decent spot for him, like, the usage is going to be up. He's going to come up against John Wall, which, I'm fine with here at home with the quote unquotes that you like to do, the home splits.
Yeah, he's fine. He's obviously coming off a game where he really disappointed everyone against the Timberwolves. That was a home game. He shot 4-12 from the floor. Assists weren't really there. I think this is a decent bounce back spot for him. I do have a little bit of interest in him. I kind of like Nick Batum at his price. He's pretty darn cheap. This is a decent matchup for him. I think the one guy that is someone that I'm heavily targeting here is going to actually be Dwight Howard. Like I think people are going to be off Dwight Howard tonight because they're going to look and see, the Wizards are good or quote unquote good against centers, but like dominant big men like Dwight Howard have absolutely demolished them. Dwight Howard in his career, like the last 3 seasons against Marcin Gortat, he's got 3 games over 40 fantasy points. He's freaking 6,700 on DraftKings, and he's coming off a 57-point outing against the Timberwolves. He's a great cash game play, but he's also like, this is a great spot for him to have like another Dwight Howard ceiling game and in GPPs. And I don't know if people are going to go there tonight.
I don't feel like people go there any night. Like I'm always kind of astounded at Howard's ownership.
It's because like everyone just thinks of him as this cancer and bad player and terrible on defense and all this stuff, but like he's been really good for Charlotte. Like they don't put him in a position to fail. Like their offense plays to his strengths. He's putting himself in a good position on the glass. Like, man, this is just such a great spot for Howard. Like he's kind of one guy that I'm plugging into a lot of my lineups as a core play.
Yep. Any interest in some of the other guys? Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Marvin Williams, anyone there?
Man, MKG is pretty cheap in cash. I think you could look at him in spots where he's sitting around that like 4K range. I'm pulling him up on FanDuel. He's too expensive, but on DraftKings at 4,100, I think you can consider him in cash.
Moving on here, we got the Clippers and Hawks. This game this game took a little bit of a pivot. With Patrick Beverley heading back. Going to be out for an extended amount of time. That obviously puts Lou Williams back into play on one site, not on the other. It's still a little too expensive for me.
Yeah, I wish that news would have come out like a little bit earlier, so we could have prepared a little bit better. But I mean, if you're looking at the Clippers here, I mean, FanDuel, you I hate using the words must play or must have because I don't think there's a must play scenario for anybody in any daily fantasy sport. But Lou Williams is a pretty darn good play tonight. We've talked about it before. His usage rate is just massive whenever Beverly is off the floor and without Teodosic and without Danilo Gallinari. He matches up really well against this Hawks team. They struggle against shooting guards. They struggle against guys that spot up. They struggle against just about everyone. God, it's a really, really good spot for Lou Williams tonight.
Yeah, and we were talking kind of about the front court as well, where Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan. Maybe if this was a smaller slate, like I'd look their way. But we were just kind of pointing out some of the guys that are within basically an arm's reach, where they just have such a higher upside.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, this changes things with Beverly being out and pulling up their usage right now, and it's being really slow. But like Blake obviously sees a decent amount of usage. He's 35%. I think you can obviously go there in GPPs. He hasn't really flashed a ton of upside recently, but there's a lot of guys in his price range where I think I would rather go. It is a great matchup for him. I think having Collins in there might take away some of the rebounding upside that Griffin has. But like, again, with Beverly out, it's really tough to ignore that usage rate of, freaking 36% for Blake Griffin.
Yeah, I think if I'm going anywhere, it's probably going to be DeAndre Jordan on DraftKings, where he's 7K and I can play multiple centers. I could play him with a Howard for, basically under 13K. I can put Gasol in there. So I think that's kind of the way I would play Jordan because it is a good spot for him. But yeah, Griffin, I mean, like I just am in agreement where, I may have one or two lineups with him in it, but he's not going to be a staple for me tonight.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning as well.
Wesley Johnson, we were talking about him before the show. He's a guy who just doesn't. The algorithm misses him, after his last couple of games, and I'm okay. I'm okay taking that chalk and using him.
I mean, we're gonna see obviously more minutes out of him because that rotation just got shorter with another guy being out. Like, I mean, that's going to increase his minutes. This is a decent spot. That the Hawks really struggle against wing players. They struggle against guys that kind of stand in the corner and shoot threes. I mean, they're allowing opponents to shoot almost 40% on corner threes. We've talked about it before with Wesley Johnson. That's this kind of matchup where you want to target him is guy against teams that struggle against guys that shoot from the corner. So I'm ashamed to admit that he's a guy that really pops in my projections right now, but I mean, at that price, again, especially on DraftKings, if you're gonna get some of these studs in here, like Wes Johnson comes in as a guy that you can plug in and get a lot of salary relief.
Yep. And on the Hawks side of things, I now have some interest in Dennis Schroeder. Patrick Beverly obviously was a solid defender, like I was on Schroeder before. But now I think, GPPs, like I'm going to be looking to use him at his usage. He's fairly cheap, like he's 7,300 over on FanDuel. DraftKings, I know he's below 7K. Where is he? Yeah, 6,700. Like I kind of like him tonight for low ownership.
I mean, look, we like to target him against teams that struggle to defend the rim, and the Clippers allowing 64% shooting at the rim. We mentioned him against San Antonio. He had a decent game, 34 fantasy points. We look at San Antonio as a decent defensive team. Against Boston, who is an excellent defense, he put up 43 fantasy points. At 6,700, he's extremely underpriced in the matchup that he has. Like I was interested in him before the Beverly news, just because of his price. Now without Beverly, like he becomes just a fantastic option in cash games and GPPs.
The kind of dreaded question of Bazemore, Prince, the nightly dance we do with those guys. Any interest?
Yes, I have interest in both. I like Prince on DraftKings at 5K. That's just really too cheap for him. Bazemore's interesting as well. We could see him eat a little bit of usage if Schroeder kind of struggles, but like this is a spot where Prince could really succeed. We know the Clippers, especially with Austin Rivers in there, they going to miss some shots. They're going to turn the ball over a little bit. Like I think this is a great spot for him, especially on DraftKings. I think he's still fairly cheap. He's 5,700 on FanDuel. I'd be willing to go there as well.
Yeah, I like him as like a small forward too, kind of paying up at the other one. But yeah, I'm with you there. Front courts, we were both talking John Collins before the show. He kind of has two outcomes. He fouls out or he double doubles.
I mean, I think both things are going to happen. Like, I mean, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Like he's gonna double and still get in foul trouble here. Um, the Clippers have not been a great rebounding team, which is kind of crazy to say whenever you think about the fact that DeAndre Jordan is there. Um, Collins, we saw his minutes go. He played 36 against the Spurs. He was playing out of his mind. Like this is a matchup against Blake Griffin. Like John Collins kind of reminds me of Blake Griffin and kind of the way they play a little bit, but I'm not saying he's nearly as good. So don't misconstrue that. But he kind of reminds me of him a little bit. It's a great spot for him. He's only 4,600. Like you anticipate him playing a decent amount of minutes as long as he stays out of foul trouble. Ilyasova's back, but he only played 7 minutes last game. Luke Babbitt is out. They're still without Muscala. If they're going to play Dedmon and Collins side by side, I think Collins probably has just an insane amount of upside in the spot. He's 4,600 on DraftKings, 52 on FanDuel, and GPPs. You take that shot, and he's borderline cash on DraftKings.
You mentioned Dedmon. I mean, any interest in him? His price has come up obviously a little bit. He's kind of hovering around about 23, 24 minutes per game. Like, it's not a bad spot for him, but he's another guy extremely foul prone, but is a guy who can also rack up some blocks and could be a cheap double-double.
I do have a little interest in him at 5,300 on DraftKings. I think he's even cheaper on FanDuel. He's 55, but price considered on FanDuel, he's probably a little bit better play. Again, I mentioned the Clippers not great on defense this year. DeAndre's been a shell of himself on defense. They're not rebounding the ball very well. It's a good spot for Dedmon. There's a lot of holes in this defense that like they struggle against spot up shooters. They struggle against the roll man and the pick and roll. And those are two areas where Dedmon is really, really good this year. So I do like him in pretty much all formats.
Yeah, last 5 games, Clippers allowing the most fantasy points per game to opposing centers. Like, they've just been getting, annihilated. Like, it started with that Embiid game and just went downhill from there.
Yeah, it really did. Like this is a spot like, and I don't know that people are going to go there tonight because they're going to look and see DeAndre. Oh, he's an excellent rebounder. They're good on defense. Blah blah blah. They're not going to realize that hasn't really been the case this season.
Yeah. Boston, Miami, one of the lower scoring, in fact, the lowest scoring total of the night, 196. I don't have a lot of interest in the game outside of maybe like one or two plays. On the Boston side, I just kind of feel at their prices, like I'd rather go some other directions and better spots. Um, Jaylen Brown's still really intriguing on FanDuel, or like if you need two small forwards and can use him in a second role. Like he's a little bit pricey, but he's been playing really well. Like he's kind of hovering around that 30, 35 fantasy point range. Like he's a decent cash game option.
Yeah, I don't mind him. I don't mind him on FanDuel. I think Kyrie's interesting. Obviously, against Dallas, we were like, well, he doesn't really have a lot of upside, but he's a great cash game floor option. He comes out and puts up 62 fantasy points. Um, I'd be willing to go back to the well here against Miami. We saw Kyrie put up a decent game there. Um, it's basically Kyrie and Jaylen Brown for me, and that's it for the Boston side of things.
Yeah, Kyrie only 8K on FanDuel. Like that, it seems expensive, but it's kind of not.
For how he's been playing, that's pretty darn cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, let's jump over to the Miami side. I like Hassan Whiteside actually quite a bit here tonight in GPPs. I just think, I mean, really the potential for him to go off and kind of grab like a 15 and 20 game is actually here. Like I know obviously on paper, Boston's been solid against centers. They've been solid rebounding because, obviously the guards are crashing a lot more. Brown, Tatum, solid rebounders. So now I still think Whiteside goes out and gets his tonight.
He very well could. He would be a GPP only option for me. Like I wouldn't go near that in cash because I mean, look, with Horford playing at the 5, like we've seen Whiteside struggle against some stretch bigs at time. Like
Yeah.
look at against Indiana. He only played 22 minutes. Like he really struggled in that game against Golden State. 16 minutes against going up against Draymond a lot. Like he kind of struggles in some of these matchups against stretch bigs. So I would have a little concern there, but obviously the upside is there for a 2020 game. GPPs only, especially like he's 8,600 on DraftKings. Like that's a really tough price to ignore in GPPs.
Yeah. I don't really have any interest in guys like Dragic or, Tyler Johnson. Like, I don't have any interest in the other Miami guys.
No, not going there. Not going. We're not going back to the well on Olynyk now that Whiteside is back. We're not going to do the Kelly Olynyk revenge game.
Toronto and New York here next, 211 total. I don't have a ton of interest in this one either. These teams obviously just played each other. Kyle Lowry finally looks back. Like I don't mind him. Decent spot here against the Knicks. He's probably one of my only interests. I don't mind DeRozan still. I know you kind of differ a little bit.
I like DeRozan if Norman Powell sits. I do not like DeRozan if Norman Powell plays. Like at that price, I just don't want to go there if Norman Powell plays. If Powell sits, Miles is definitely interesting. Again, DeRozan's interesting. I don't mind taking a flyer on Kyle Lowry, but there's just other guys that I'd rather go to in the spot, like in that price range. There's just so many better plays. Like I'd rather take Wall for a few hundred more than Kyle Lowry here, and I don't want to touch the Knicks side of this game. Even maybe Kristaps and GPPs, but that's it.
Yeah, I've been diving into the Porzingis like GPP games the last few games in these kind of tougher matchups, and he continues to he's going to pop off one of these nights for a big shooting game, but he's in a little bit of a slump right now.
I mean, the shot attempts are still there, except for obviously last time out against Toronto, he only took 13. But like he's coming off 4 bad shooting games, but like he was outstanding in the few games before that. Like I'm not ready to jump on the Kristaps has regressed train. Like I'm not going to be that guy. It's a good spot for him. Like I think he could come out and put up a decent game, but again, in that price range, there's better cash game options.
Yeah, 8,600 on DKs was awfully intriguing GPPs.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, we can quickly gloss over that one. Next one here, Dallas and Memphis. On the Dallas side, I have a little bit of interest in Dennis Smith, at the cheaper price. Like he's still a guy who's kind of in this mid 6K range. Usage obviously there, kind of back down to where he was going before that real hot stretch. So I'm kind of looking at him to bust out again.
Yeah, he struggled shooting the ball over the last 3 games. He's 9 of 36 from the floor. We know without Mike Conley, this team not as great on defense. I'd be willing to go there at 5,500 on DraftKings. Other than him, though, like I don't have any interest in anyone from Dallas. Like you could make a case for Harrison Barnes as like a guy that's going to play a lot of minutes, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and his price is a little bit up after that bigger game. So I think more of him. I like on FanDuel at 67.
Yeah.
On the Memphis side, I have some interest here. We can start with Marcus Saul, who he's probably one of the guys that I'm just going to use almost 100% of tonight.
Yeah, I wrote him up in the GPP article. He's smashed Dallas in the past two games. Dallas, terrible rebounding team. We know Gasol has about a 30% usage rate without Conley on the floor. Like, this is just a great spot for him. I I again, a guy that I think you can build around as a core option in your lineups tonight.
Any interest in Mario Chalmers? A little bit pricier than where he was the last few days, but I kind of don't mind him like on FanDuel a little bit at least.
Cash games, yes. I'm not gonna go there in GPPs. Like, I realize, like, on DraftKings he's 5K. I don't remember what his price. He's
It's
56
5.6. Yeah.
on FanDuel. More cash games. Like, I don't see a 40-point ceiling out of him tonight. Like, I don't think he's gonna shoot 58% from the floor and take 12 shot attempts again tonight.
Right. Tyreek Evans has obviously been the other offensive guy for Memphis. He's reached a new price where I kind of just don't want to use him. Like, he's 7,500 on FanDuel. He's 300 more than Booker. He's 400 more than Middleton. Like, I'm a little bit kind of off the Tyreek train now.
Yeah, I am as well. Like, I don't really want to go there. The only real other guy that I kind of have a little bit of interest in this game is Jermichael Green. Like, the minutes trending back upward. 34 minutes against Portland. Not a lot of upside, but if you're going to get 34, 35 minutes against Dallas, like, this is a spot where you could fall into like 8, 9 rebounds and a couple second chance points and put up a solid game.
Yeah, no, definitely. San Antonio, New Orleans next year, 207 total. I want to have interest in this game because obviously the potential of some of these guys, but I don't have a lot. On the Spurs side of things, I'm kind of off of them tonight, and it sounds weird outside of like, Kyle Anderson for cheap.
I think I have more interest in this game than you do. First, obviously, Kyle Anderson coming off a great game against Atlanta. He's playing out of his mind recently. The assists have gone up. He's been outstanding. He has one of the better assist rates on the team. His price not really climbing up to a point where he's priced out of consideration. The Pelicans struggle against small forwards this season. I think you can look at him in cash and GPPs. And Patty Mills, like, if he's going to play over 30 minutes going up against Rajon Rondo defense, like, I don't know how you fade that at only 4,500 on DraftKings and 4,400 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Mills is a guy I definitely don't mind. But like Aldridge, Gasol, like I'm kind of off the front court a little bit here.
I kind of am too. Like, I don't, there's better spots to attack.
Yeah. On the New Orleans side, do you have any interest in anyone? I know, obviously Davis is still really cheap on DraftKings. Like, I could see going back to the well with him here in 96.
Davis's price went down. Davis puts up 61 fantasy points against the Thunder, and his price went down. Like, he was one of those guys where everyone around the industry was like, "Oh my God, Anthony Davis is under 10K. You have to play him." Now he's at 9,600, and I know it's the Spurs, but like, how do you fade Anthony Davis at that price? Like, I know part of that game was influenced by the fact that DeMarcus Cousins got ejected, and that's news that we're going to have to wait and see. Like, there's a 99.9% chance that the league does not do anything for that Boogie elbow to Westbrook, but it's Boogie. He has a history of, being in trouble with the league. So if the off chance happens that Boogie does like have to serve a suspension or something, like, Anthony Davis becomes one of those guys where you just plug and play. Cousins pissed off DeMarcus Cousins at 10-3 on DraftKings going against the Spurs. Again, this is a great spot for him too. Like, he was absolutely smashing against Oklahoma City before getting ejected. That's a tough fade at 10-3 on DraftKings. That's a really tough fade.
Yeah, both those guys, obviously the upside's tremendous. And I think they might go a little bit overlooked, probably more so Cousins than Davis, just because Davis's price is, single digits. But on a 14-game slate, like we kind of haven't even hit another peak of games here where, we're getting Harden, we're getting some of these other guys. We haven't hit the Golden State game. So ownership, I think, is going to be pretty low in some of these other spots.
Yeah, and these two guys, like, nope. Aldridge is going to be able to kind of defend one of them, but like, you're going to tell me that Pau Gasol is going to stop DeMarcus Cousins tonight?
No.
Really? Pau Gasol's almost 40 years old, and he's going to stop DeMarcus Cousins? Yeah, there's no chance in hell. No chance.
Any other interest in the backcourt guys from New Orleans?
Rondo's kind of cheap, but like it's Rondo.
This game's not on national TV, so we can't go Rondo.
There you go. Yeah, it's Rondo. Minutes are trending upwards, so you can obviously take a shot there. But like, it's Rajon Rondo. Like, I'm not if he's gonna be popular tonight, then he's a 100% fade for me.
Yeah. Denver, Houston, huge total here, 226. Denver side of things, obviously they lost Paul Millsap for a few months, but kind of a sizable loss for them. How do you see that shaking up? Because I think a lot of people are going to try and just flock to Kenneth Faried. Obviously we got to still wait for Wilson Chandler news tonight. Like, there's kind of a lot to worry about here with Denver.
It really is, and we have Mike Malone back on the sideline, so that just makes things even worse. You mentioned Kenneth Faried. I guess we can go there first. Like, this is the type of game where you would normally want to target Faried. Like, it's a fast-paced matchup, a lot of getting up and down the court. The problem is Houston is an excellent rebounding team. They're not allowing a lot of second chance points. They're only allowing like 7.8 offensive rebounds per game, and Fareed's a guy that is a great offensive rebounder. Like, I think he's going to be a guy that people kind of flock to tonight. And in cash games, that's fine. In GPPs, I can't play him. Like, I can't go there. Like, this could be a big trap game for Faried. Like, he could get the start, and then Mike Malone could just get pissed off and bench him after like the first 2 minutes of the game. So I don't see myself going there with Faried. I want to get some of the other pieces of the Denver side of things. If you're wanting to try to exploit the Millsap thing, I think maybe Trey Lyles is going to be the guy to kind of target. But most of these guys, like if you look at how the last game broke down, Faried, Lyles, Hernan Gomez all played right around 20 minutes. So that's probably how you're going to see this thing shake out for them.
Yeah, I just think, for the most part, like Will Barton's still going to be the guy that I probably get the most exposure to. He's only 5,400 on DK. I know obviously Wilson Chandler missed last game. He came in and shot, 60%, but I just see the fact that they probably could run Chandler at the 4 more heavier and then use Barton at the 3, and that's kind of what we get from them for most of the game. So Barton at 5,400, shooting guard, small forward eligible is probably my favorite play from Denver.
I have a play that is I like even more than Will Barton, and I'll get to him. I think if Chandler does play and they move him to the 4, I think he becomes an excellent option there, especially at 4,800 on DraftKings. Like, you could see him put up 30, 32 fantasy points, and I'll take that at that price. Barton, obviously a fine play across the board, even if he doesn't start. Like, he'll come off the bench and be a spark plug, and if this game blows out, you'll see him get some blowout run. But Gary Harris is my dude. Like, I'm the biggest Gary Harris truther in the world, but this is just the perfect game for him. A fast-paced matchup against a team that really struggles in transition. Harris is their best transition player. He's a great spot-up shooter. The Rockets struggle against spot-up shooters. He's gonna play a bunch of minutes to match up against Paul and Harden. He shoots the ball really well from the corner. He shoots 3-pointers really well. And like, if you had to guess, without looking at Gary Harris's game log, since returning from his shoulder injury, what would you guess that Gary Harris is shooting from the floor?
52%.
He is shooting over the last 3 games 65% from the floor, 58% from 3-point range. Like, Gary Harris is on freaking fire right now, and he's 5,200 on DraftKings. He's 5,800 on FanDuel. He's in my GPP article. I love Gary Harris today. He's a core play for me. He's going in almost every single one of my lineups. It's Gary Harris day for me.
So when we come to the end of the pod and I ask you who's your top scorer of the night, you better say Gary Harris.
He's not gonna put up 60 fantasy points, but I mean, this is a spot where he's been really good against the Rockets in the past.
Yeah, I don't really have any interest in guys like Moutier or Jamal Murray tonight. Do you?
Both are fine in GPPs.
Jokic, obviously the other topic. I like him tonight in tournaments. I like some other options in cash games, but he's definitely going to be a guy I look towards in GPPs.
Yeah, obviously had a decent game against the Kings. Didn't start out very well, but I mean, if you're going to get 12, 14, 15 shot attempts out of Jokic, maybe a couple extra assists, like it's definitely a good spot to target him. Without Millsap, I think you at that price, like you kind of have to keep rolling him out there until he goes up to like the 10K range.
Yeah. On the Houston side of things, I was almost ready to skip. On the Houston side of things, obviously, we got Chris Paul back for probably about what 25 minutes again tonight.
I'm waiting to see if there's news about that. I would expect that maybe he starts to play. I think he could get closer to 30 minutes tonight. And at 7,500 on DraftKings, 30 minutes of Chris Paul against Denver, whoo, buddy, that's going to be really tough to ignore.
I mean, he's already basically been putting up, 35, 36 fantasy points in 21, 24 minutes. And also, I mean, in back-to-back games where they probably didn't even need him in the fourth quarter at all. If this game stays closer, we may see Paul kind of lean up in towards that 28-30 range.
If it does, like if he plays close to 30 minutes, he's pretty much a lock for a double double and close to 40 fantasy points. And at 7,500, whew, I'll take that.
Yeah. And you were looking at James Harden. You mentioned James Harden, obviously, in your GPP article, because you just don't think he's going to garnish the ownership of the other stars tonight.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. Like if you look at the other stars, you have Giannis, LeBron, Cousins, all these. You have the narrative, the Golden State guys. Like Harden could go extremely overlooked, and you're gonna get the industry wide narrative that Harden's usage is way down with Chris Paul on the floor. Like it's only a 48-minute sample size, but he still has like a 34% usage rate with Chris Paul on the floor. That's like the second highest usage rate in the NBA. Like his usage doesn't go down that much. And with another shooter on the floor, he has an opportunity to get a couple extra assists. He's getting to the line pretty frequently. This could be a Harden ceiling game. And if he's going to go overlooked, like I really want to have some exposure to him.
Yeah. As far as the secondary guys for Houston, I don't have a ton of interest in guys like Trevor Ariza, Ryan Anderson. Clint Capella is a little bit expensive for my taste. So I kind of just looking at really the backcourt there for Houston for me.
I think you have to keep an eye on the status of Ryan Anderson. He's battling an illness. If he sits, that's going to open things up maybe for Eric Gordon. Maybe they start Eric Gordon, go kind of small. Maybe they start PJ Tucker. I would have some interest in Tucker if Anderson sits out. I'm obviously not going near Anderson tonight. It's a home game, so we know those lights are going to bother him. And I'm not going to ride the Ryan Anderson train.
Orlando, Minnesota next year, 217. This is a game I like here. We'll start with the Orlando side of things. They've been a little bit shaky, obviously, of late. Minutes have kind of been all over the place. Are we back to kind of Orlando, the rotation of death like we've kind of gotten the past few years?
Unfortunately, I think so. Like man, none of these guys are playing a ton of minutes. Like obviously the Elfrid Payton thing, with his minutes. We discussed that on the last podcast.
Yeah.
Like he's coming off a hamstring injury. Shelvin Mack is there. You have DJ Augustine. You have Jonathan Simmons who can handle the ball. Like I just don't see Elfrid playing a bunch of minutes any given night. Vucevic only played like 29 minutes last game. Like Frank Vogel is being Frank Vogel and being kind of a hole and not playing his guys a bunch of minutes. And it really sucks for DFS, but there's still some opportunity in this game.
Yeah, there definitely is. Obviously, I'm kind of looking probably a little bit more at the front court in this one and kind of as contrarian options. I don't mind Gordon and Vucevic here in this spot. Definitely GPP guys for me. I mean, Gordon's got a decent enough floor, but I just think he's a little bit overpriced in comparison to some of the other ranges I'd rather go. But those are probably the two guys I have the most interest in.
It's really just Vucevic for me. Like we saw him put up an excellent game against the Pacers. Only, like I said, only played 29 minutes, 19 shot attempts, 25 points, 13 rebounds. Again, we know that Timberwolves struggle on defense against bigs because Karl-Anthony Towns is not a good defender. I would go there. Don't really have interest in Aaron Gordon. Like he's going to match up with Taj Gibson, and Taj is getting up there in age, but Taj is a freaking excellent defender. I don't really want to go there. I don't mind looking at like Evan Fournier. Again, kind of been bad recently, but he's going to have one of these games where he breaks out and you kind of regret not having him. That would be the way that I look. Maybe if you need a cheap punt option, you could look at Most Bates here. Jonathan Isaac is already ruled out, so you'll see Mo Buckets get like his 14, 16 minutes and take his like 10 shot attempts in those limited minutes.
And on the Minnesota side, I have some interest in Karl Anthony Towns. He's been another guy this year, solid floor. He's obviously expensive, hasn't flashed a ton of upside outside of really, what was the one game against the Spurs that seems to be the last one that pops up to mind. But in a really good spot here, Orlando 25th in defensive efficiency against centers. They're bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed. They can't rebound. This is a cap blow up spot, but this new Minnesota team doesn't allow those cap blow up spots to always happen.
They really don't. Like, they're not like the big benefit that Cat generally had was the fact that like you could get him the ball down in the post and he could really operate, and they're not really doing that. Like, his usage rate, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I know it's down this season. It's really tough to consider going there as bad as he's been recently, but 9,200 on DraftKings, that price is starting to really fall. Like, this is the matchup where you mentioned this could be a blow up spot for him. Like, you definitely can't do it in cash games, but GPPs, man, if you lock in Cat and he goes off, like, I don't think he's going to be very popular, and he could really he could probably win you a GPP if he has a huge game.
Yeah, he could. And as far as the other options, this is kind of a GPP game for me, especially on the Minnesota side because Butler's super expensive. I don't like his shooting guard eligible position over on DraftKings. Like, I'd rather use him at small forward on FanDuel, but he's 8,500. He's the same price as Paul George. Obviously, he's kind of below that next tier. I don't mind him in GPPs tonight because we've kind of seen a couple of big games. Like, once again, we'll echo our thoughts. It's basically been if he can get the peripheral stats, like, he can do fine. But if he doesn't, we saw that last game where he dropped a real dud.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you're going to get from Jimmy Butler. I think he's fine if you want to go there. One thing that does stand out in the matchup for him is obviously Orlando struggles in isolation defense, and Butler about 14% of the time operates in isolation. He's one of their better isolation scorers. So I don't mind going there. Obviously, you do need those peripheral stats. You need the rebounds. He didn't get any assists last game. You would expect that to change. He's a fine GPP play. I won't go there in cash, though.
No. Jeff Teague, I have a little bit of interest in for a guy that's below 7K that can get you 35 plus fantasy points. Like, it's a decent spot for him. Once again, it's Jeff Teague. Like, he's a guy who can come out and kind of put up a 24 fantasy point game where he can go close to 40. Like, it doesn't seem to be any in between with Teague.
Yeah, I think I'd rather go Schroeder or Dinwiddie, though, over Teague.
Yeah, that's fair. Anyone else there on that Minnesota side? Do you like Taj Gibson at all? It's kind of crept back down with Deng back.
Yeah, I don't really want to go there.
Yeah. And the game of the night here, we got Golden State and Oklahoma City, 221. This is just for me, it's a crapshoot as far as what can happen.
It's like I mentioned earlier, it's a freaking all-star game. I mean, you have 4 all-star caliber players on Golden State, and you have 3 all-star caliber players on freaking Oklahoma City. Like, it's going to be a high-scoring game. There's a chance it could be a blowout, obviously, with Golden State being Golden State and the Thunder being the Thunder. It's a huge narrative game for both sides. There's a lot to talk about, but man, picking your exposure here is going to be key, and it's really freaking tough. It's really tough.
We'll start with the away side here with Golden State. I mean, we're kind of looking at it's a tough matchup. Like, there's nothing that really pops out with the Thunder where I kind of just immediately go and want to attack. I don't mind Curry in GPPs, but he's not my favorite play on the board tonight. Durant still comes in third for me. Like, I like Giannis and LeBron a little bit more, even at the price difference. But I'm going to get some exposure to Durant a little bit here.
Hey, you had to get exposure to Durant. Like, you have the narrative play. Obviously, this game is back in OKC, and it's not like a traditional revenge game. Like, the Thunder didn't trade him away. Obviously he left, but the crowd is going to be loud. It was crazy last year. I was at that game last year. It was absolutely insane. Like, Kevin Durant says he's learned to tune out all that BS and whatnot, but he's kind of emo and he's a cupcake. Uh, but like he's gonna get up for this game, and I know he has a tough individual matchup with Paul George. But man, like this is a spot where like Durant could actually put up a huge game, and he's 10K on DraftKings. Like against this Thunder team at OKC last year, he put up 34 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, had 50 fantasy points. Like 10K, like I mean, I would take 50 fantasy points.
Yeah, I would too. I kind of like Draymond here tonight a little bit. Like this is kind of a game where if it gets a little bit scrappy, we usually see Green kind of come out on top in these types of matchups, and he's been playing well. I mean, averaging 10, 7, and 6 over the last few games. The steals and blocks are back up. Like I don't mind him. He's kind of cheap, I guess, for what Green can kind of usually go. He's only 7,600 on DK. He's 75 on FanDuel. I think those are reasonable prices for a guy who probably has a 30, 35 fantasy point floor here.
Yeah, he's the guy that I do have a little bit of interest in. I'm also a little concerned that he, goes on one of his nut kicking sprees and gets thrown out of this game, because that seems that happens in every single game. He kicks somebody in the nuts, so that is a little bit of concern.
Steven Adams should probably wear a cup tonight, to be honest, because Adams would be the culprit.
Yeah, probably. He has been the guy that's gotten kicked pretty much every time. But I like Green here. It's a decent spot for him. I do like Steph in GPPs, and I like Clay in GPPs, but this could be that game where you see maybe Durant come out with like 50 fantasy points and everyone else kind of just chill around like the 35 to 40 range. And that concerns me, especially with the ownership that you expect this game to kind of garner.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why I like Green a little bit more, because he's not dependent on the scoring. Like he can get fantasy points in other ways.
Yeah, for sure.
On the OKC side of things, Westbrook down at these new price tags for him, like I'm biting. You put the bait on the hook, like I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, I mean 10-4, he comes out, puts up 70 fantasy points against the Pelicans, and now his price goes down to 10-4 on DraftKings. Obviously, he's back up at 10K on FanDuel, but this is a matchup Russ is going to get up for, and I know these games OKC got blown out last year, but you can't look at it like you did last year. Like Golden State could game plan for Russell Westbrook last year. Like it was, we help off Andre Robertson. They don't have any other offensive threat. Like we can just double, triple team Westbrook. We pack in the paint and not let him get to the rim. Well, things are different. They have Paul George, they have Carmelo Anthony, they have Jeremy Grant, like they have Abrinas who's playing really well. Like this isn't a game where they can just kind of cut Westbrook off. I think Westbrook could come out and actually have a huge game in the spot.
Yeah, I do too. And when we look at some of the other guys here, like what are your thoughts on Paul George? We'll get to Melo here in a second, who is cheap and we kind of like tonight. But what are your thoughts on Paul George? Like I think he can go a little bit overlooked.
I like Paul George a lot. Like we've seen his game kind of evolve. He's a guy that's getting a ton of steals. He's shooting really well from 3-point range. Like we talked about it on the last podcast, and he came out and freaking what did he have? He had like 3-3-pointers in the first 3 minutes of the last game. He shot 6 of 10 from three against the Pelicans. It's a good spot for him. I know Kevin Durant's is a great defender. Like I don't know when people are going to catch on to that, but I think the spot where Paul George can really excel tonight is in the pick and roll. If Oklahoma City can come out and kind of run some offensive sets and run some sprint pick and roll, I think Paul George could have a good game. 8,500, I think on both sides actually. I do like him at that price.
And then Melo, I mean, Melo's been playing well, rebounding pretty well of late. Like I kind of am intrigued here at 6,700 on both sites. Like that's pretty cheap for what his production's been. And look at the Warriors. I mean, third most fantasy points allowed to power forwards this year. Bottom half in defensive efficiency. He's the cheapest, obviously, of the kind of the big three there. And then you have Adams, who we'll get to. But I think I'm going to grow more and more intrigued with Melo as the day goes on.
How much does it pain you to say that? Like if you're depending, like
it pains me a lot.
Like it's Carmelo, obviously, but I mean, as you mentioned, he's been playing really well. The shot attempts have been there for him. He's rebounding the ball really well. At 6,700 on DraftKings, and he's still really cheap on FanDuel too. 6,700 there. Like, that's a pretty fair price for a guy that that should easily get 35, 40 fantasy points tonight.
Because like you have to, I mean, if he was another thousand, and he only gets you 28 or something like that, then you have a little bit of a problem. Like if he does that at 67, he's not exactly going to kill your lineup.
No, and it's a cheap way to get exposure here. Like there's not a lot of cheap options that are in good spots in this game. He's one of those guys, and there's a couple other guys that we'll get to, but it's a decent spot for Melo.
Yeah. And Steven Adams, another way to get cheap exposure to this one. I like him tonight. Good spot here. Golden State, they've struggled against centers this year. Just 19 defensive efficiency, bottom 10 fantasy points allowed. Like Adams is always kind of that play can go out there and get you a double-double in these types of matchups.
Yeah, obviously let us down last game against the Pelicans because he was in foul trouble, but had 15 points, 3 rebounds. Like the points are there for him pretty much every single night. Like the rebounds, you expect him to get a few more when he's not battling freaking DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis for rebounds. He's a great cheap option to get exposure to this game. Like I don't know how you don't have some exposure to the Oklahoma City side of this game. And if you're wanting to do it like in a cheap manner, I think you kind of have to look at Adams and maybe Jeremy Grant, who I think sees extended run just to kind of battle the length of Golden State here.
Yeah. I mean, overall, 221 total here. This is going to be a game. Like we said, it can kind of go two ways if things get funneled fantasy points wise into the stars. Like Westbrook, Durant could put up huge games, or we can kind of see where everything's a little bit balanced out and guys kind of top out at 45 fantasy points.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Chicago and Utah next year, 197 total. Chicago, one of the two teams on back-to-backs tonight. You had some more interest in this game than I do. I maybe a guy here or there on both sides, but that's it for me.
This game's pretty gross, but it's really tough to ignore how great Denzel Valentine has been playing recently, and that's really disgusting to say that Denzel Valentine's been playing really well, but I mean, the minutes have been there for him. He's rebounding extremely well. He's scoring. He's a very cheap. He's 4,800 on DraftKings. Like that's really really cheap for a guy that's playing as well as he is. He's a guy that I kind of have a lot of interest in. The Jazz really struggling to defend above the break threes. Are allowing opponents to shoot 40% on above the break threes. Valentine, 86% of his 3-point attempts this season are above the break. He's attempted 7 in 3 straight games. It's a good spot for him. Markkanen's in a good spot. I really do think he could put up a decent game here. And that's pretty much it from the Chicago side of things.
Yeah. And on the Utah side, I kind of feel like it's a good spot for these guys. I just kind of feel like some of them are a little bit overpriced. Like Donovan Mitchell up in this new 7K range. Like I'm kind of looking some other directions. Derek Favors is a little bit expensive. Like, he's right around Melo. I think I'm going to lean Melo over Favors tonight.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to go about it. Yeah, I don't really want to target like Chicago, not a great team, but they're decent defensively. I don't really see myself going with anyone from Utah. They're all kind of priced out of consideration for me.
Milwaukee Phoenix. I mean, here we go. Another one where it's the second underrated narrative street of the night where we get Bledsoe going up against Phoenix. We got Greg Monroe who can get 20 minutes against the team that just would randomly play him on some nights. This is going to be a game I target a lot of. Obviously, both sides really in good spots.
If you take the narratives out of it, this would be just a fantastic game for everybody. Eric Bledsoe, man, how do you fade Eric Bledsoe today? He's 6,500, going back to Phoenix, who's really, really bad against point guards anyways. And then you have the narrative on top of that. Like, I don't care what his ownership is in GPPs. I don't know how you fade him tonight.
No, I mean, he's the guy, like, he just kind of takes a lot of those plays out of that range, a little bit lower. Like, he gives you that value. Like you said, it's a great spot. Like, there's not much more to say. Like, even if you did take the narrative out of it, like you said, it's just like you big guy I plug in regardless, even if he played for Milwaukee his entire career.
Yeah, I mean, minutes are trending upwards for him. Obviously, not shooting the ball very well since coming over to Milwaukee, but that changed last game. He shot 46% from the floor. Milwaukee incredibly shorthanded without Mirza Teletovic, without John Henson, without Matthew Dellavedova. You expect Bledsoe to play a decent amount of minutes here. Man, it's this is a spot where you're probably going to regret not having him in your lineup. Like, you could see Bledsoe just come out and put up like a 70 burger like tonight. And
Yeah.
people faded the Oladipo revenge a couple nights ago. Do not fade Derek Bledsoe revenge tonight. Just don't do it.
No, I think if, obviously we're looking at Bledsoe and Giannis as the two popular plays, but, kind of the same thing always goes for Middleton, where I like him in GPPs. Like, this is a matchup where he can thrive. I mean, he's playing heavy minutes. He's averaging 37 per game this year. Against a team that really struggles to defend the 3-point line, like Middleton's a guy who can average 6-7 3-point attempts per game. Couple down games in a row, but we know he has that 50-plus outing, and like 6,900 on DK is a really nice price for him.
It really is, and you're going to see him. Obviously, mention the minutes, but like those are going to stay there. He'll probably play over 40 now that they're without John Henson. That rotation gets shortened. I don't know how they're going to handle the center position, but you would expect maybe Giannis plays some of the five whenever like Alex Lynn and Greg Monroe are out there.
Center Giannis.
Yeah, so that means you're going to see Middleton play extra minutes. You're going to see Tony Snell play extra minutes. Maybe Brogdon play some extra minutes. God, like it's all these guys are in play tonight. Like every single one of them is a decent play. And the toughest thing to figure out is what you're gonna do with the center, the power forward center position with Milwaukee, because they have Thon Maker, they have DJ Wilson, they have Joel Bolomboy. Like, one of these guys is probably gonna have a big game, and I don't know how to attack it yet. Like, I haven't figured that part out, but both these guys are really cheap. One of them's probably going to be in a GPP winning lineup.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to take probably a guess, like I don't think it's Thon Maker. I just don't think this is the matchup where he kind of gets in and plays 25 minutes and really does well.
I don't think it is either. I don't like DJ Wilson. Like, I don't think he's that good, but it could be him.
Let's go with the worst player scores the most points. I think that's how we can treat this one.
It may be. Like, I don't even know if Joel Bolomboy is with the team right now, but it could be him. Like, it's going to be one of those guys. And if you're building multiple lineups, I would rotate some of those guys in GPPs. Like, obviously you don't want to go there in cash, but in GPPs, I would do a rotation of a couple of those guys in your lineups.
Yeah, and obviously Giannis, we want some exposure too.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So, on the Sun side of things, I have a little bit of interest in Devin Booker. Obviously, like I think for me, like I'm going to want some correlation to the Sun side, and I think Booker and Warren are interesting spots because they're going to be really overlooked on this slate because they're kind of in that mid range where they're kind of a little bit expensive, and people aren't going to really have the price to pay for them.
Yeah, I think Warren's my guy. Obviously, we know Booker, excellent option. Usage is just through the roof without Bledsoe there. He's operating as a point guard a lot of times. But like I said, Warren's my guy. I mean, he's 20 or more points in 5 of the past 8 games. We like taking wings against the Bucks. He would be the guy that I'd want to get some exposure to from the Phoenix side of things if you're looking, for like at the guards or the wings.
Do you have any interest in the front court at all for Phoenix?
I really want to play Greg Monroe, but man, like Jay Triano came out and said yesterday he doesn't know how, or Monday, was it Monday? I think it was Monday, said he doesn't know how he's going to find minutes for 3 centers. Like, this dude he's hell bent on playing 3 centers for whatever reason. He thinks he has to play Tyson Chandler and Alex Lynn and Greg Monroe, all these guys minutes. I don't know why. I don't know why you can't just get it through your head. Don't play Tyson Chandler. But like, if Chandler sits and we get word that he's going to let Monroe kind of run with things against his former team, I would have a lot of interest in Monroe.
Yeah, he's definitely a GPP guy that I'll take shots on, and probably more so on DK, where he's power forward center and, obviously 4,600. because if he does go out there and plays 18 minutes, like he can still get you 20 fantasy points. On FanDuel, I don't think I can obviously take that.
Yeah, I mean, his price is cheap enough. I mean, you would expect that he probably gets closer to 20 plus minutes, so he'd be definitely worth a shot in this spot.
Yeah. Phoenix point guards, do you have any interest at all?
No, I'm not. I'm not. Man, I'm not gonna go to the trying to predict Mike James or Tyler Eulis games. Like it's that's just a situation I'll stay away from.
Yeah. Last game of the night, we made it. We were like waiting for the roller coaster for an hour and a half, and we're finally on the front step. Lakers Kings, Lakers on the back to back. I weirdly don't have a ton of interest in this game. I think it can be actually a dud.
There's a couple places you can look, but I'm not that intrigued by too much of this game at all.
Like on the Lakers side, I mean, once again, if you want Kuzma and you want a guy who's going to eat plenty of minutes, like, and he's playing really well, like Kuzma's my guy. Like he's just starting to reach, a higher price tag where you think a little bit more. But I mean, once again, I think him and Ingram are probably the guys that I'll use the most of.
Those guys are fine. You mentioned the minutes; those are going to be there for him. Not guys that I have a ton of interest in on this slate. Like there's just better. I think there's better places to go. I do like Jordan Clarkson a lot in this spot. I think this is a great spot for him. Obviously, coming off a game where he only played, I believe, 16 minutes against the Bulls. Good bounce back spot for him. I really like Julius Randle here. I think he's a fantastic GPP option. Played outstanding against the Bulls. Minutes we've seen 30 minutes and two of the last four games. Like he'd be a guy that I would have a decent amount of exposure to. And then Lonzo Ball, you could always take a flyer on in GPPs.
On the Sacramento side, George Hills continues to be fairly cheap. Like I don't mind him. Probably a little bit more over on DraftKings and FanDuel though.
Yeah, he's cash and GPP viable for me. Just 4,100 price not going up. He's been outstanding since playing alongside Fox in that starting lineup. I really like the spot for him. It's a good spot for Fox. Obviously, you have the Fox first ball like narrative if you want to go there. Fox owned ball in college, just completely owned him. You can take a flyer on Fox. I mean, he's still 4,600. I'd be willing to go there. He played 32 minutes against Denver. Obviously, with Buddy healed back, maybe that goes down a little bit. But both those guys are interesting. And I'd be willing to go back to the well with Willie Cauley-Stein. I know he let everyone down last game, but I'd be willing to go back there as well.
Yeah, I don't mind him. Zach Randolph, I have a little bit of interest in. Like he's only 4,900 on FanDuel. He's not going to play big minutes, but obviously if he gets 25 minutes against the Lakers, I'm cool with him. He can get 25, 30 fantasy points.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all.
So, yeah, we'll quickly wrap that one up. We're done.
Whew, man, that was a lot to talk about.
I need one of those like camelback things that like hook the water up, like because I can't leave.
I got my Arctic cooler here.
Yeah, we're ready to roll. So, high score of the night. Let's do that one with no limit, since there's just a ton of options.
James Harden.
Harden. I got Giannis here. Giannis destroys the Suns. So, bold calls
There you
here.
go. There you go.
That's it for us. You can head over to dayfantasycafe.com. You can check out Brent's GPP article up for tonight. Also, our optimizer and cheat sheets. And we'll see you guys. Everyone have a good holiday.
Yeah, good luck tonight and enjoy Thanksgiving or not Thanksgiving if you don't celebrate like the Canadians don't.
Thanks. We're going to end it on that sign off. Take care, guys.